It was just after 4 a.m. on May 1st, 2010, when a frantic 911 call pierced the quiet of Oak Beach, Long Island. The woman on the line was panicked, breathless, and terrified. "They're trying to kill me," she cried. Her name was Shannan Maria Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort from New Jersey who had traveled to meet a client in this secluded, gated community. Before we dive deeper, if you care about justice and untold stories, like this video, share it, subscribe, and click the notification bell. For 22 minutes, Shannan remained on the line with dispatch. She ran from house to house, banging on doors, pleading for help. Some residents opened their doors. Others did not. What exactly she was running from remains one of the great mysteries of this case. When Suffolk County Police finally arrived, Shannan was gone. They told neighbors she was probably just hiding and would show up. They didn't consider it a high-priority case. After all, she was a sex worker. To them, it didn't warrant an urgent search. But Shannan's family knew better. Her mother, Mari Gilbert, immediately began pushing authorities to take her daughter's disappearance seriously. She filed missing person reports, contacted media, and took to the streets herself. 7 months passed with no progress. Then, on December 11, 2010, a Suffolk County officer conducting a training exercise with his cadaver dog near Gilgo Beach stumbled upon something disturbing. Human remains wrapped in burlap. But they weren't Shannan's. Over the following months, authorities uncovered the bodies of 10 more people. Most of them women, most of them sex workers, all hidden along Ocean Parkway. What began as a search for one woman became a full-blown investigation into one of the most chilling unsolved serial murder cases in U.S. history. What do you think Shannan was running from that night? A killer, a cover-up, or something else entirely? By the time Shannan Gilbert's story made headlines, the case had already taken a dark turn. The discovery of 4 women's remains, each wrapped in burlap and placed just yards apart, sent a wave of fear through Suffolk County. And the deeper investigators dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. All 4 victims were young women in their 20s. All had advertised escort services on Craigslist, and all had vanished between 2007 and 2010. The media dubbed them the Craigslist Ripper victims. But where was Shannan? Despite her being the catalyst for the search, police insisted she was not connected to the others. According to them, her disappearance was likely accidental. They theorized she became disoriented, ran into the marsh, and drowned. But her family refused to accept that. Mari Gilbert, Shannan's mother, grew louder with each press conference. "My daughter is not a footnote," she told reporters. "She's not separate from this." She was scared for her life that night. As public pressure mounted, more remains were discovered. Over the next few months, authorities uncovered a total of 11 bodies, including a toddler and an Asian male dressed in women's clothing. The diversity of victims raised new questions. Was this the work of one killer, or were there multiple predators dumping bodies in the same stretch of desolate beach? Still, no trace of Shannan. The one person who had sparked this entire chain of events had simply vanished into the night. And then a chilling twist. Nearly 19 months after her disappearance, Shannan's belongings were found in the marsh. Her jeans, shoes, and cell phone. Days later, her skeletal remains were discovered just yards from where her items had been located. But the condition of her body raised serious doubts. Her hyoid bone, located in the neck, was missing. Forensic experts disagreed on whether she had been strangled or drowned. The autopsy was inconclusive. Do you believe Shannan's death was an accident? Or was someone silencing her forever? What's your theory? Drop it in the comments below. Your insights might just open new perspectives. The night Shannan Gilbert vanished, everything unraveled in just a few terrifying minutes. Yet to this day, those minutes remain shrouded in confusion, fear, and suspicion. In the early hours of May 1st, 2010, Shannan arrived at the Oak Beach home of Joseph Brewer, a client who had hired her through Craigslist. Her driver and security, Michael Pack, waited outside in the car. The visit was supposed to be routine, in and out, no trouble. But something went very wrong. Around 4:51 a.m., Shannan placed a 23-minute 9 911 call. Her voice was panicked, trembling, and incoherent. "They're trying to kill me," she repeated, but she never clearly said who they were. She ran from Brewer's house, banging on neighbors' doors, begging for help. One man, Gus Coletti, opened his door and tried to calm her. Shannan hid behind him briefly, then bolted again before police arrived. Another neighbor, Barbara Brennan, also saw her running, describing her as confused, terrified, and screaming. Police came but didn't search the marsh. They spoke with Brewer and Pack, both of whom gave conflicting stories. Brewer said he had nothing to do with Shannan's panic. Pack claimed he tried to get her to leave, but she refused. Neither was detained. And then silence. Shannan was never seen alive again. Her 911 call wasn't released to the public for over a decade. When it finally was, it revealed even more troubling facts. She had stayed on the phone for over 20 minutes. And during that time, she didn't get the help she desperately needed. Why didn't police immediately treat this as a potential abduction? Why weren't the people she fled from investigated more thoroughly? And how could someone make a frantic 911 call, run through multiple properties screaming for help, and still vanish without a trace? What would you have done differently that night if you were one of the neighbors? Share your thoughts below. The Suffolk County Police Department treated Shannan's disappearance as just that, a missing persons case. They didn't immediately suspect foul play, and they didn't launch a wide-scale search. Instead, they seemed to believe Shannan had simply run off, possibly in a drug-induced state. But her family didn't buy it. Mari Gilbert, Shannan's mother, was relentless. From the moment she learned her daughter was missing, she pushed the police, held press conferences, and kept Shannan's name in the news. She refused to let them brush this off. And then everything changed. In December 2010, more than 7 months after Shannan's disappearance, police returned to Oak Beach. But not to search for her, they were training a K9 cadaver dog. During that exercise, the dog caught a scent along Ocean Parkway. That's when police found a set of human remains, and then another, and then another. Within days, 4 bodies were uncovered, all within a quarter-mile stretch, all wrapped in burlap, all women, all believed to be sex workers, but none of them were Shannan. This discovery exploded into national headlines. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a missing woman. This was about a potential serial killer operating for years undetected on Long Island. Police now had a problem they couldn't ignore. And yet, even then, they maintained that Shannan's case was different. That she wasn't connected to the other women. That her death or disappearance wasn't suspicious. Mari Gilbert didn't believe them for a second. "My daughter didn't just vanish," she said. "Something happened to her, and I'm going to find out what it is." Why would police insist Shannan wasn't connected, even after finding multiple bodies along the same stretch where she vanished? What's your theory? Drop it in the comments. If you believe stories like Shannan's need to be heard, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell. By January 2011, the cold grip of winter couldn't slow the investigation. The Suffolk County Police Department expanded their search along Ocean Parkway, and what they found only deepened the mystery. A 5th set of remains was discovered, then a 6th, and by April, the body count had climbed to 10. 10 victims, mostly women, all believed to be involved in sex work. The remains spanned over several miles between Gilgo Beach and Jones Beach, but still no sign of Shannan. Each new discovery brought chilling similarities. Missing for years, online escort listings, and eerily consistent body disposal. Yet despite the growing list of victims, authorities doubled down on one puzzling claim. They didn't believe a serial killer was at work. To the public, that made no sense. What else could explain such a pattern? Shannan's family was growing increasingly frustrated. They believed she was the first victim, the reason the entire burial ground had been discovered in the first place. But law enforcement seemed to treat her like an outlier. Meanwhile, a new twist surfaced. Investigators uncovered a partial set of remains belonging to an unidentified toddler. Days later, they found the remains of a young Asian male and another woman. The victims no longer fit one profile, and that only muddied the theory further. If this was the work of one killer, his victim pool was widening. If it wasn't, what were they dealing with? And still, Shannan's voice, captured in that frantic 23-minute 911 call, haunted the entire case. Why did police continue to exclude her from the investigation? What were they afraid of? Do you think they were covering something up, or just refusing to see what was right in front of them? Mari Gilbert wasn't the kind of mother who gave up easily. As law enforcement stalled and the headlines began to fade, she kept showing up. At police stations, vigils, press conferences, holding Shannan's photo like a badge of defiance. She believed her daughter had been murdered, and she wasn't going to let the world move on. But Suffolk County Police seemed increasingly uninterested in connecting the dots. They insisted Shannan's case was different, possibly a tragic accident. The working theory, that she had wandered into the marsh and drowned while in a state of distress. To Mari, that was unacceptable, and she wasn't alone. Civil rights activists, journalists, and online communities began scrutinizing every move the police made. The refusal to release Shannan's full 911 call raised red flags. So did the inconsistent reports from the 3 men she visited that night. Especially the last one, Dr. Peter Hackett, who had a home just feet from where her belongings would later be found. Hackett inserted himself early into the case. He called Mari just days after Shannan disappeared, claiming he ran a home for wayward girls and had given her medical treatment. Later, he denied ever making the call, until phone records proved he had. That contradiction turned him into a prime suspect in the court of public opinion. But police never charged him. No official explanation was ever provided. Meanwhile, cadaver dogs continued to search the marshy terrain behind his home. And then, 7 months after Shannan vanished, something surfaced. A piece of her clothing, torn, weathered, caught in the reeds. Had she really just run into the swamp and drowned? Or was this a sign that something far darker had happened on that isolated stretch of land? Do you believe Dr. Hackett was hiding something? Or was he just a man who got too involved? The discovery of Shannan's belongings, a pair of jeans, shoes, and her purse, scattered across the dense marshland near Oak Beach, reignited her family's worst fears. But it wasn't just the location that was disturbing. It was what wasn't found. No phone, no jacket, no trace of her body. Investigators still pushed the narrative of accidental death. They suggested Shannan may have experienced a mental health episode, removed her clothes due to hypothermia, and wandered blindly into the mire. But Mari wasn't buying it. The marsh wasn't a place someone could easily get through, especially in the middle of the night, barefoot, panicked, and alone. Yet police downplayed every inconsistency. Then came another shock. During routine searches near the same stretch of Ocean Parkway, only a few miles from where Shannan vanished, police uncovered the skeletal remains of another woman, and then another, and another, for sets of remains, all within a short distance of each other. All women, all believed to be sex workers. Suddenly, what was once treated as a missing persons case began to look like the hunting ground of a serial killer. But still, Shannan was not among the victims. The media now turned its spotlight on Gilgo Beach, dubbing the case the work of the Long Island serial killer. Police created a task force. The FBI joined in. But Shannan's case remained categorized as separate, an outlier. Mari saw it differently. To her, the message was clear. Her daughter didn't matter as much. Maybe it was because she was an escort. Maybe it was because of her mental health struggles. Or maybe Mari feared it was something more sinister, a cover-up hiding in plain sight. Do you think police were intentionally excluding Shannan's case to avoid implicating someone powerful? For Mari Gilbert, it was never just about her daughter's disappearance. It was about the silence that followed. The silence from Oak Beach residents. The silence from Suffolk County Police. The silence from a system that didn't seem to care. 8 months after Shannan vanished, her case had sparked a wildfire, but not for the reasons Mari hoped. Instead of finding her daughter, police had stumbled upon 10 other bodies, all in the same general area, all women except for 1 toddler and 1 male victim, wrapped in burlap, dismembered, and dumped along the same remote strip of road. The public was horrified. The press circled like vultures. Yet Mari's pleas were still met with shrugs. She kept showing up at police briefings, holding up photos of Shannan, demanding answers. If Shannan had been a lawyer's daughter, she once said, they would have found her the next day. But then came the moment Mari had feared and hoped for. In December 2011, 19 months after the 911 call, police found remains in the marsh near Oak Beach, a jawbone, later a full skeleton. Dental records confirmed it was Shannan. Her body was located just 500 feet from where her clothes had been found. Despite this, Suffolk County Police insisted there was no foul play. They blamed her death on drowning caused by a psychotic episode. An accident, not a murder. Mari exploded. Her daughter had called 911 screaming for help. She had banged on doors. She had begged for her life. And now she was dead, in the same area as a string of brutal homicides. And the official story was that it was all just a coincidence? Mari refused to let it end there. Do you think Shannan's death was connected to the Gilgo Beach victims? Or was it a separate tragedy? If you believe every victim deserves justice, no matter their background, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Your voice can help uncover the truth. The official cause of death? Accidental drowning. But Mari Gilbert knew better. Her daughter's bones were found face up in a marsh, just minutes from where she was last seen. The location was oddly consistent with the dump sites of other victims, yet the police still refused to link her case to the Gilgo Beach murders. They insisted she had a mental breakdown, ran into the swamp, and died of exposure. But something didn't sit right with Mari. The position of Shannan's body, the absence of shoes, purse, and cell phone, the missing necklace she always wore, all raised red flags. And then there was the fact that her hyoid bone was missing, a small bone in the neck often fractured during strangulation. Why hadn't this detail been emphasized? Mari wasn't the only one asking questions. A private autopsy conducted by Dr. Michael Baden, a renowned forensic pathologist, indicated possible strangulation. He couldn't confirm it without the hyoid bone, but the possibility was enough to change everything. Meanwhile, other women's families were beginning to echo Mari's frustration. Too many details were being dismissed. Too many questions left unanswered. And now the biggest question loomed. If Shannan didn't die by accident, who killed her? Was it the same person who left bodies along Ocean Parkway? Or had she uncovered something far more dangerous? A secret within Oak Beach that someone didn't want exposed? What do you think? Was Shannan's death staged to look like an accident? Behind the gates of Oak Beach, whispers began to grow louder. The community had always been tight-knit, but after Shannan's disappearance, fear crept into the cracks. Some neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the night she ran through the streets screaming. Others refused to talk at all. One name kept surfacing, Dr. Peter Hackett. He had lived just a few houses away from the last known location of Shannan. At first, he claimed he didn't know her. Then he admitted he had spoken to her. Then he said she had called him. Eventually, it was revealed he had placed 2 strange calls to Mari Gilbert days after Shannan vanished, saying he was running a home for wayward girls, and that he had tried to help her daughter. But what kind of doctor runs a home for wayward girls from a gated beach community? And why did he lie about ever knowing Shannan? Dr. Hackett later changed his story again, denying that the phone calls had ever happened, despite phone records showing otherwise. When Mari Gilbert sued him for wrongful death, the lawsuit was eventually dismissed. But Hackett's inconsistent statements, proximity to the last sighting, and evasiveness made him a person of interest, if not to the police, then certainly to the public. Still, no arrests were made. The Suffolk County Police Department maintained their stance. Shannan's death was an accident, but if it was, why was there so much deception? Do you believe Dr. Hackett was hiding something? By the summer of 2011, the case had begun to rot in limbo. Shannan's family, especially her mother Mari Gilbert, was growing increasingly frustrated with the Suffolk County Police Department. To them, it felt like the authorities had already decided how Shannan died, and were no longer interested in proving otherwise. Despite the discovery of 10 other bodies along Ocean Parkway, the police maintained that Shannan's case was unrelated. According to their theory, she had experienced a psychotic episode, run into the marsh and drowned. But Mari didn't buy that. Not for 1 second. She had listened to the 23-minute 911 call over and over. She could hear the fear in her daughter's voice, the desperation, the belief that someone was after her. It didn't sound like a woman hallucinating. It sounded like a woman running for her life. And what about the men who had been with Shannan that night? Her driver, Michael Peck, the client, Joseph Brewer, the neighbor who opened and closed the door without letting her in. Their stories had shifted. Details changed. Timelines blurred. Yet none of them had been arrested or even treated as suspects. It felt to Mari like her daughter had been disposable. Just another sex worker whose life didn't matter enough to investigate thoroughly. She started appearing on talk shows, reaching out to reporters, holding press conferences. Her mission was clear: make the world care about Shannan. Then came a small breakthrough. In the fall of 2011, the family secured the help of John Ray, a Long Island attorney with a reputation for taking on messy cases. Ray fought tooth and nail to obtain the full 911 call. He filed Freedom of Information requests, battled legal delays, and publicly pressured the police to release the tapes. But the department refused. They insisted the call was not relevant to any criminal investigation, even though the entire discovery of the Gilgo Beach victims had stemmed from that very night. Meanwhile, a private pathologist hired by the Gilberts made a chilling claim. Shannan's hyoid bone, a small bone in the neck, showed signs that could be consistent with manual strangulation. That was a far cry from death by drowning in a marsh. The fight for truth was no longer just personal. It was public. National media had started to take interest, and the heat was rising. Do you believe Shannan Gilbert's death was unrelated to the Gilgo Beach murders? Or was it part of a much bigger cover-up? The pressure was mounting, but Suffolk County PD wasn't budging. As the years dragged on, Mari Gilbert and her attorney John Ray grew louder, more determined, and more strategic. They filed lawsuits, held rallies, sat down with journalists. If the police wouldn't investigate Shannan's death as a homicide, they'd do it themselves, in full view of the public. Attorney John Ray became a constant figure in the media, arguing that Shannan's case was being buried to avoid opening a deeper, darker investigation. He believed the police were protecting someone, and he hinted that the real Long Island serial killer could be much closer to home than anyone was willing to admit. Ray set his sights on Dr. Peter Hackett, the neighbor who had called Mari days after Shannan disappeared, claiming he ran a home for wayward girls. That call had never made sense. Hackett later denied ever contacting Mari, until phone records confirmed he did. Ray pushed hard to expose what he believed was a pattern of suspicious behavior. He suggested that Hackett's call was more than just strange. It could have been a taunt, or a cover-up, or worse, the sign of someone trying to insert themselves into the investigation for reasons only he understood. But Hackett wasn't the only person Ray found suspicious. He also scrutinized Joseph Brewer, the client who had hired Shannan that night, and Michael Peck, the driver who claimed Shannan just ran off into the darkness. Every timeline, every inconsistency, every gap in communication became part of a growing web of doubt. In December 2011, Mari Gilbert filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Dr. Hackett, accusing him of contributing to Shannan's death. Though the suit would eventually be dismissed, it sent a message. Mari wasn't going away. In the background, new remains continued to be found. The identities of the Gilgo Beach victims slowly came together. All women, all sex workers, all with eerily similar stories. But Shannan, the one whose disappearance led to the entire discovery, remained an unrelated incident, according to police. That contradiction haunted everyone watching. How could the case that triggered the manhunt be considered separate from the rest? What do you make of Dr. Hackett's phone call to Mari Gilbert? Strange coincidence or deliberate clue? Like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. This story is just getting darker. The deeper John Ray and Mari Gilbert dug, the more questions emerged, and the more inconsistencies they uncovered. They weren't just probing Shannan's case anymore. They were shaking the foundation of the entire Gilgo Beach investigation. One of their sharpest points of concern was the 911 call. Shannan had called emergency services in a panic the night she vanished, but the full audio remained sealed from the public for years. All anyone knew were bits and pieces. She was frightened, saying someone was after her, and the call had lasted for more than 20 minutes. Yet help never truly arrived. Why wasn't that enough to consider her death suspicious? Ray demanded the release of the audio. He believed it would prove that Shannan wasn't simply hallucinating or disoriented. She was running for her life. If the police failed to act on a terrified woman's call for help, that alone could suggest a serious failure or a deliberate cover-up. Meanwhile, the community surrounding Oak Beach grew defensive. Residents were reluctant to speak to media or attorneys. Some sided with Dr. Hackett. Others simply wanted the story to go away. But for Mari, silence was not an option. Her daughter was dead, and she was convinced someone in that gated neighborhood knew exactly why. Adding to the tension, a series of internal leaks from law enforcement hinted that some officers believed Shannan's death was connected to the Gilgo victims. But the official narrative stayed the same: accidental drowning. No foul play, no link. Yet Shannan's autopsy didn't support that. Her bones showed no signs of water damage typical of a drowning, and her body had been found in a marsh, not submerged. Her clothes were missing, her remains scattered. Still, officials insisted there was no crime. As the public watched the back and forth unfold, confidence in the investigation eroded. Shannan's case had exposed more than just a tragedy. It had pulled back the curtain on a system struggling to find the truth, or perhaps avoiding it altogether. Why do you think the police withheld Shannan Gilbert's full 911 call for so many years? In the years that followed, Mari Gilbert refused to let her daughter be forgotten. She showed up to every press conference, held vigils in Oak Beach, and pushed for new investigations. But she wasn't just battling police indifference. She was battling time. The longer the case dragged on, the more evidence degraded, and the more memories faded. Then, in 2015, a significant shift occurred. A private forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, a former New York City chief medical examiner, was brought in by the Gilbert family to review Shannan's remains. His findings shocked many and added fuel to a fire Mari had been stoking for years. Baden concluded that Shannan had likely been strangled. Her hyoid bone, a small U-shaped bone in the neck often broken during strangulation, showed signs of damage. Though the official cause of death still read undetermined, Baden's assessment gave the family something new: validation. A scientific opinion that aligned with their long-held suspicion. Shannan didn't die by accident. Someone had killed her. But this revelation didn't just reignite interest in Shannan's case. It also re-energized questions about the Gilgo Beach Four, whose murders remained unsolved. If Shannan had been murdered, and if her death happened in the same place and time as the others, how could they still claim the cases weren't connected? Still, Suffolk County Police resisted. They stood by their conclusions. Despite growing pressure from the public, the media, and private investigators, no one was arrested. No one charged. It was as if the entire investigation had stalled, and that was exactly what Mari feared most. To her, this wasn't just about Shannan. This was about a larger system that failed vulnerable women. Many of the Gilgo victims, like Shannan, were sex workers. They came from marginalized communities, struggled with poverty or addiction. Mari believed that had they been from wealthier backgrounds with different occupations, the response would have been immediate and relentless. She began speaking out not only about her daughter, but about the systemic failures that allowed a possible serial killer to go undetected for so long. Do you believe the cases of Shannan Gilbert and the Gilgo Four were being deliberately kept separate by authorities? And if so, why? The tides began to turn in 2016, but not in the way anyone expected. On July 23, 2016, Mari Gilbert, Shannan's relentless advocate and the face of the push for justice, was found dead in her daughter's apartment in Ellenville, New York. She had been stabbed more than 200 times. The news sent shockwaves through the community and devastated those who had followed the Gilgo Beach case. How could the very woman who spent years demanding answers for her murdered daughter now be murdered herself? The person arrested for Mari's killing was Sarah Gilbert, Shannan's younger sister. Sarah had a documented history of severe mental illness, including schizophrenia. Reports later revealed she had been off her medication. In court, it emerged that she believed her mother was trying to kill her, a tragic delusion that ended in unimaginable violence. Mari's death was a crushing blow to the Gilbert family, but it was also a brutal interruption to the advocacy work she had tirelessly led. She had kept the pressure on investigators, spoken to the media when few others would, and refused to accept silence as an answer. Now, with Mari gone, many feared the momentum would fade. But it didn't. In fact, Mari's death became a rallying point. Her surviving daughters, Cher and Stevie, picked up the torch. They didn't just grieve. They organized. They filed new FOIA requests, pushed for the release of Shannan's full 911 call, and continued to demand that police reclassify Shannan's death as a homicide. Public pressure swelled again. Petitions circulated. Journalists revisited the case. Netflix and Lifetime developed projects around the story, drawing even more attention to the sprawling mystery surrounding Gilgo Beach. And behind the scenes, something else was brewing. A slow-moving, highly secretive investigation had never really stopped. Technology was advancing. DNA databases were expanding. And someone somewhere had made a mistake. One that would eventually crack the case wide open. After all these years of silence and dead ends, do you think the killer thought he'd gotten away with it? For years, the public had been fixated on the possibility of a serial killer, yet the case remained officially unsolved. Despite the discovery of at least 10 sets of human remains along Ocean Parkway, many of them young sex workers, there was no arrest, no solid suspect, and almost no answers. But that changed in 2022. Suffolk County Law Enforcement quietly established a special Gilgo Beach task force. This new unit included members from local, state, and federal agencies, including the FBI. After years of public pressure, the case was finally being given the kind of investigative muscle it deserved. But unlike before, this time the work was happening in silence. While the public wondered if the case had gone cold, behind the scenes, the task force was combing through mountains of data. Old cell phone records, burner phone histories, call logs, and surveillance footage. The killer, whoever he was, had made efforts to remain anonymous. Many of the victims had communicated with clients using disposable phones. The assumption had always been that the killer had covered his tracks. But no one stays invisible forever. Investigators reanalyzed a set of burner phones used to contact multiple victims. These phones were only powered on for short periods of time, used for specific calls, and then turned off. But what the killer hadn't realized was that every time the burner was switched on, it pinged nearby cell towers, sometimes just briefly, but enough to place them near specific locations. One of those towers was near Midtown Manhattan, another near Massapequa Park in Long Island. Investigators began cross-referencing the pings with data from license plate readers, surveillance cameras, and toll booths. After painstaking work, they narrowed down the possibilities, and one name kept resurfacing: Rex Heuermann. He was a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, just a short drive from where the bodies were found. On the surface, he was unremarkable. A married man with 2 children, a business owner, and a seemingly normal life. But when detectives pulled back the curtain, they found something chilling. He had conducted disturbing online searches, including detailed queries about body disposal, torture methods, and the Gilgo Beach case itself. He owned a large arsenal of weapons, and DNA recovered from a pizza crust he discarded matched genetic material found on one of the victims. On July 13, 2023, Heuermann was arrested and charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, 3 of the women whose remains were found wrapped in burlap in 2010. He was also named the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. The news shook Long Island. After more than a decade, the so-called Long Island serial killer had a name, a face, and an address. But for the Gilbert family, the moment was bittersweet. While the arrest signaled a breakthrough, Shannan's death remained officially unexplained. Her case was still not classified as a homicide. Her 911 call, now the most infamous in the story, was still the subject of ongoing debate. Still, the arrest gave hope. Maybe now, investigators would revisit Shannan's case with fresh urgency. Maybe now the silence would finally break. Do you believe Rex Heuermann is responsible for all the Gilgo Beach murders, including Shannan's? If you're following this story closely, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss the next update. Your support helps keep these important stories alive. The arrest of Rex Heuermann sent ripples far beyond Long Island. For the families of the known victims, especially those wrapped in burlap, buried in hauntingly similar ways, the news brought relief, closure, and grief all at once. But for Mari Gilbert, Shannan's mother, it had come too late. Mari had died 7 years earlier, murdered by another daughter, Sarah, during a tragic mental health episode. She never got the chance to see the arrest, never got to sit in a courtroom and hear the name of the man investigators believed was responsible for the deaths near Gilgo Beach. Never got to ask the question she carried like a stone in her chest. What really happened to Shannan? Because here's the truth. Even after the breakthrough in the Gilgo Beach case, Shannan's death remained its own mystery. Investigators had never officially tied her to the other women. Her remains were found a mile inland, in a marshy area, with none of the signs linking her to the burlap killings. No bindings, no signature, and despite the eerie proximity of her body to the dumping grounds, police maintained she may have died accidentally after fleeing into the marsh. But new questions were surfacing. First, there was the 911 call. Shannan's voice, panicked, terrified, and incomprehensible at times, had never been fully explained. She had clearly believed someone was trying to kill her. Was it just a paranoid delusion? A psychotic break triggered by her mental state and the unfamiliar surroundings? Or was she right? Then there was the behavior of the two men at the Oak Beach house, Joseph Brewer and Michael Pack. Brewer had claimed Shannan simply freaked out and ran into the night. Pack said he tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't get back in the car. Yet both stories had inconsistencies. Brewer never called 911, and Pack, who was her driver, left the area after Shannan disappeared. A move that baffled some investigators. In hindsight, the police's early assumptions may have caused them to overlook evidence. Treating Shannan's case as unrelated, even dismissing it as an accident, had allowed key moments to slip through the cracks. In fact, one of the most haunting theories began to circulate, that Shannan's desperate flight through the Oak Beach neighborhood may have flushed out the killer. Consider the timeline. Shannan vanished in May 2010. Her search led to the discovery of multiple remains in December 2010, months later, during a sweep for her. Had the killer known she ran off and fearing she'd drawn attention to the area, rushed to dispose of or move bodies? Was Shannan not a random case, but the key that cracked the silence? Adding to the suspicion were reports that some residents in the gated Oak Beach community may have deleted surveillance footage or declined to cooperate with law enforcement early on. A culture of privacy, protection, and avoidance had grown up around the case. And within that silence, the truth about Shannan remained buried, both literally and symbolically. Her case was re-examined in 2020, when celebrity pathologist Dr. Michael Baden reviewed the autopsy and concluded that her death was more consistent with homicide than accidental drowning, citing damage to the hyoid bone and the positioning of her remains. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to reignite the question. Who or what was Shannan running from that night? The fog surrounding Shannan's final moments only deepened after the arrest of Rex Heuermann. While authorities were confident in naming him a prime suspect in the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, they repeatedly emphasized that Shannan Gilbert was not part of that pattern. Her death, they said, was not consistent with Heuermann's victims. But for those who knew Shannan and those who had followed the case, that separation felt forced. Let's rewind to the night of her disappearance. After making the 911 call just before 5 a.m., Shannan ran from house to house in Oak Beach. Residents later recalled a panicked young woman banging on doors, pleading for help, but none of them called 911. One man, Gus Coletti, did see her. He offered assistance, but by the time he retrieved his phone to call for help, she had vanished again, into the marshland behind the homes. That was the last confirmed sighting of Shannan Gilbert alive. For over a year, her family pushed law enforcement to continue searching. Their persistence eventually paid off. In December 2011, the Suffolk County Police announced they had found Shannan's purse, cell phone, and jeans in the marsh, and then, several days later, located her remains. But something about the scene felt off. Her body wasn't buried like the Gilgo four. There was no burlap. Instead, she was lying face up in the thick reeds, her body skeletonized after a year of exposure to the elements. The official autopsy ruled the cause of death as inconclusive, and police theorized she had become disoriented, possibly under the influence, and drowned in the marsh. But the position of her body raised doubts. Her clothes were found far from where the body lay, and her hyoid bone, a small bone in the neck often fractured during strangulation, showed damage. Even more concerning, it took the medical examiner 7 months to release her autopsy report. By that time, evidence had degraded, and potential clues had been lost. Shannan's family believed the police were too quick to dismiss foul play. They hired Dr. Michael Baden, the same forensic expert who had testified in the O.J. Simpson trial, to conduct a second opinion. Baden's conclusion was chilling. The damage to her neck and the circumstances of her death pointed toward homicide. Still, police refused to reclassify the case. Then came new allegations, this time from residents of Oak Beach. Some whispered that certain members of the tight-knit, gated community had engaged in sex parties, escorts, and off-the-books gatherings that weren't meant for outsiders to know about. If true, it raised the possibility that Shannan had witnessed something or someone she wasn't supposed to. One woman, Barbara Brennan, claimed she'd heard rumors of snuff parties, though these allegations were never confirmed. Others believed someone in Oak Beach had chased Shannan into the marsh, not to kill her necessarily, but to silence her. The theory was simple: a panic, a struggle, an accidental death, followed by silence. And that silence continued for years. Meanwhile, a public rift grew between Suffolk County Police and the Gilbert family. Accusations flew in both directions. The department insisted it had done all it could. Mari Gilbert accused them of failing her daughter, of covering for powerful people, of burying the truth under red tape. The public watched in frustration. Was Shannan a tragic accident, or the one victim who got away long enough to blow the case open? In that haunting 911 call, her voice echoed across minutes of fear. "They're trying to kill me." Was it paranoia or prophecy? In the years following the discovery of Shannan's remains, her mother, Mari Gilbert, became a symbol of tenacity, a mother unwilling to let her daughter be forgotten or dismissed. She didn't have the resources of law enforcement or the backing of big-name advocates. But what she did have was relentless conviction, and that, over time, began to shake the narrative. When Suffolk County Police stuck by their theory that Shannan's death was an accident, a woman high on drugs who wandered into the marsh and drowned, Mari pushed back harder than ever. She held press conferences, marched along the same roads her daughter had run, and stood outside government buildings demanding accountability. If she was a politician's daughter, they wouldn't say it was an accident, Mari said in one interview. They would have found her that night. Frustrated by the lack of transparency, Mari sued the Suffolk County Police Department for access to 911 tapes and case files. For years, the department refused. They argued it would compromise the integrity of the investigation, an investigation they simultaneously claimed was closed due to no evidence of a crime. The contradiction wasn't lost on the public. Eventually, Mari's persistence paid off. In 2015, a judge ordered the release of Shannan's full 911 call to her family. What they heard only added fuel to the fire. For 23 minutes, Shannan begged for help. Her voice was terrified, disoriented, but eerily lucid. She repeatedly said, "They're trying to kill me." She named her driver, Michael Pack, and referenced people she claimed were chasing her. Despite the 911 operator trying to get her location, Shannan remained vague, frightened and possibly running for her life. Even more disturbing, the dispatcher never relayed the urgency of her tone to police in real time. By the time officers arrived in Oak Beach, Shannan was gone. 3 different residents had seen her that night, but no one had insisted she stay or called 911 until hours later. Each of their stories was slightly different. One said she was irrational. Another said she seemed scared but ran off. The third claimed she hid behind a boat before disappearing into the dark. If Shannan had been white, middle class, or from a more privileged background, would those neighbors have acted differently? That question lingered like smoke. The Gilbert family's civil suit also forced scrutiny on Michael Pack, her driver. He claimed he only left after searching for her for over an hour. But text messages and timelines raised doubts about his version of events. Why hadn't he called police immediately after she ran off? Why had he waited? Years passed, but Mari didn't stop. She was determined to get justice not just for Shannan, but for all the victims whose voices had been ignored. In 2016, the family's fight took another tragic turn. Mari's youngest daughter, Shannan Gilbert, who had long struggled with mental illness, began spiraling. On July 23, 2016, Sarah stabbed Mari more than 200 times in her Ellenville, New York, apartment. She then bludgeoned her mother with a fire extinguisher and called 911 to confess. The woman who had fought so hard for her daughter's truth was now dead, killed by another daughter in the grip of psychosis. The tragedy stunned the public. Some blamed the years of trauma and stress. Others pointed to a system that had failed multiple generations of the same family. What was clear is that the Gilbert story had become one of relentless grief layered over a mystery that still hadn't been solved. Yet, even in death, Mari's fight didn't end. Attorney John Ray, who had represented the Gilberts for years, vowed to carry on Mari's legacy. "She gave her life to this," he said, "and we're not done." Do you believe Shannan was targeted by someone that night? Or was her death truly a tragic accident as authorities claimed? By 2017, the Long Island serial killer case had become a maze of stalled leads, conflicting narratives, and public distrust. Suffolk County Police had maintained for years that Shannan Gilbert's death was an accident, unrelated to the women whose bodies were found along Ocean Parkway. But for many, that explanation no longer held weight. Too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. Attorney John Ray continued Mari Gilbert's mission. He filed motions, released case documents, and even published segments of Shannan's 911 call, stirring public outrage. In one haunting portion, Shannan can be heard whispering, "There's someone after me," before the line goes silent for several seconds. When it resumes, her voice is shaking. "Please, help me." One of the most controversial aspects of the case remained the behavior of Dr. Peter Hackett, the Oak Beach resident who initially claimed he had met Shannan the night she disappeared, then later denied it. Phone records revealed he had called Mari Gilbert 2 days after Shannan vanished. Why? He said he ran a home for wayward girls. But no official records supported that claim, and no other woman had come forward to verify that such a home even existed. Hackett's inconsistencies placed him under a long shadow of suspicion, though police never charged him. Meanwhile, families of the Gilgo Beach victims were growing increasingly vocal. Each woman found along that desolate stretch of highway had once been reduced to a footnote, a name buried in headlines about prostitutes and escort services. But they were daughters, sisters, mothers, human beings. The public began demanding change. In 2020, a new Suffolk County Police Commissioner, Geraldine Hart, took over. A former FBI agent, she promised transparency and reform. Under her leadership, authorities released previously sealed evidence, including a belt with initials WH or HM, believed to be handled by the killer. It was the first major update in years. But it wasn't enough. Then came the breakthrough. In 2022, a special task force was formed to re-examine the Gilgo Beach killings using modern forensic technology, including genetic genealogy, cell tower mapping, and behavioral profiling. By 2023, their efforts paid off. On July 13, 2023, Rex Hoyerman, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, was arrested and charged with multiple murders connected to the Gilgo Beach case. Authorities had matched his DNA to genetic material found on burlap used to wrap some of the victims. He owned a green pickup truck matching a vehicle seen in connection with one of the women. And disturbing internet searches on his devices revealed a fascination with torture and serial killers. But what about Shannan? Despite the dramatic arrest, police insisted, again, that her case remained separate. John Ray and many others refused to accept that. They argued that Shannan's death, which occurred so close in time and place to the Gilgo victims, couldn't be ignored. Was it a coincidence that a terrified woman disappeared in the very area where multiple murdered women were later found? Or had she run straight into the darkness, into the grip of a killer? Today, the question still hangs in the air. Shannan's 911 call, the panicked pleas, the disjointed flight through Oak Beach. It remains a chilling final chapter. But whether she was victim number one or a tragic outlier, one thing is certain. She changed everything. Her voice, frantic, terrified, and unrelenting, forced the world to look deeper. Her mother's fight pulled the veil back. And now, years later, that fight continues. Viewer question: do you believe Rex Heuermann is connected to Shannan Gilbert's death? Or is someone else still out there? If the story moved you, help us keep these voices alive. Like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so more people hear stories that deserve to be told. The arrest of Rex Heuermann sent shockwaves through Long Island. Neighbors were stunned. Quiet man, an architect, a father. He looked like anyone else. But inside his Massapequa Park home, investigators uncovered a trove of horrors. Locked safes, burner phones, chilling online searches, and evidence tying him to at least 3 of the Gilgo Beach victims. Still, for the Gilbert family and others watching closely, there remained a gaping hole, the unanswered question of Shannan's fate. The Suffolk County Police continued to assert that Shannan's death was not homicide, that her body, found face down in a marsh with no signs of trauma, supported their theory of accidental drowning. They cited the autopsy. They leaned on the fact that toxicology reports showed no overwhelming drug presence. They claimed she panicked, fled, and got lost. But Mari Gilbert had long rejected that narrative, and so had many others. Shannan had been running for her life. Her 911 call wasn't the voice of someone confused or intoxicated. It was coherent, desperate, intentional. She named people. She asked for help. She said they were trying to kill her. That plea echoed for 23 minutes. Then nothing. John Ray, the family attorney, had spent years pulling back the layers. He subpoenaed phone records, emails, and interviewed residents. What emerged was a tangle of contradictions. Some Oak Beach residents claimed they saw Shannan that night. Others said they never heard a thing. A few gave conflicting accounts of who was present at the time, and what was said in the hours before she vanished. Then there were the audio tapes. Ray had released a portion of the 911 call to the public, but much of it remained sealed. He insisted the full call revealed far more, details that could reshape the entire narrative. He demanded its release. Police refused. They cited privacy laws, active investigation protocols, and concerns about the call's graphic nature. It only fueled suspicions. Meanwhile, forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, known for his work on high-profile cases, conducted a second autopsy on Shannan's remains. His conclusion: homicide was possible. He noted injuries to Shannan's hyoid bone, suggestive of strangulation. It wasn't definitive, but it contradicted the original cause of death. The case was now stuck between two realities: the official version and the one carried by a grieving mother, a determined lawyer, and a growing chorus of advocates. In interviews, Mari Gilbert remained relentless. "They want you to believe my daughter died because she was a sex worker," she once said. "But she was a human being, and she deserves justice." Her activism sparked documentaries, news specials, and even a Netflix film. Public pressure mounted. Why hadn't the entire 911 call been released? Why had so many residents of Oak Beach been allowed to contradict themselves without consequence? Why were some leads pursued and others ignored? And the most haunting question of all, had Shannan, in her final moments, stumbled onto something bigger? A theory had begun to circulate, that Shannan's frantic escape had accidentally exposed a serial killer's dumping ground, that in the act of running for her life, she'd inadvertently triggered a discovery no one was meant to make. Because without Shannan, there would be no Gilgo Beach case, no task force, No Hoyerman arrest. She was the catalyst. The tragedy wasn't just in her death, but in how many others might have died in silence had she not fled into that night. If the 911 call holds the full truth, do you believe authorities are withholding it to protect someone, or to protect themselves? The phone call came in quietly, almost as an afterthought. It was May 2012, nearly 2 years after Shannan Gilbert's disappearance, when Suffolk County Police finally received results from the FBI behavioral analysis they'd requested. The profiler's conclusion was unsettling. Shannan's behavior on the night she vanished was consistent with drug-induced paranoia, possibly intensified by a mental health episode. But that wasn't the part that gnawed at Mari Gilbert. The profile also stated, with quiet certainty, that her death was likely not a homicide. Mari slammed the folder shut. She had waited months for this. She had fought for every piece of attention this case received. And now, once again, they were telling her that her daughter wasn't worth a real investigation. But she wasn't backing down. In fact, she was just getting started. Later that summer, Mari filed a lawsuit to force Suffolk County to release all the 911 call recordings from the night Shannan vanished. The calls were public record, but authorities refused to hand them over, citing an ongoing investigation. Mari didn't buy it. She believed they were hiding something that could explain why her daughter screamed, "They're trying to kill me," for 23 minutes and no one came to help. The lawsuit dragged on. It took nearly a decade before those calls were finally made public. Meanwhile, the community around Oak Beach began to fracture. Once tight-lipped, some residents started talking to journalists, to each other, to lawyers, and the stories they told were not consistent. One neighbor said she saw Shannan running and knocking on doors, terrified. Another claimed he heard a scream that night but didn't think much of it. Some said Dr. Hackett was a good man, eccentric, yes, but helpful. Others whispered about his strange behavior and inconsistent stories. Even within the Gilbert family, the strain was mounting. Mari had become the public face of the case, but behind the scenes, grief had transformed into obsession. She clashed with detectives. She distrusted nearly everyone. She was exhausted, but she wouldn't stop. In October 2015, 5 years after Shannan's death, her family held a private autopsy. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, a former chief medical examiner of New York City, was clear. Her death was suspicious. He found signs consistent with homicidal strangulation. Not an overdose, not exposure. It was a powerful moment for the family. For the first time, they had a respected expert confirming what they had always believed. But Suffolk County still didn't change the classification. Shannan's case remained undetermined. What will it take, Mari wondered, for someone to care? By now, the case had entered a strange limbo. It wasn't officially closed, but little was happening. Reporters moved on. The public lost interest. And still, a serial killer's victims remained unidentified. Still, Shannan's cries echoed in the silence. If this wasn't murder, then what was it? Do you think Shannan's autopsy findings should have forced the police to reopen the case as a homicide? The cold Atlantic wind swept across Oak Beach as detectives reviewed years' worth of notes, timelines, and missed clues. But by late 2022, one name had risen to the top of the suspect list. A man who had lived less than a mile from where the first bodies were found. His name was Rex Hoyerman. A hulking figure with thick glasses and a quiet demeanor, Hoyerman lived in Massapequa Park with his wife and children. He commuted daily to New York City, where he worked as an architect. To most, he was ordinary, even boring. But inside his digital footprint, investigators uncovered a double life that chilled even seasoned detectives. Using burner phones and false identities, Hoyerman had reportedly contacted sex workers for over a decade. His search history revealed disturbing content: violent fantasies, torture-related materials, and inquiries about how police trace calls and DNA. It wasn't just the volume of searches, it was the consistency, the patterns, the precision. In March 2022, a breakthrough came. A hair recovered from burlap used to wrap one of the Gilgo Beach victims, Megan Waterman, was finally analyzed using advanced forensic genealogy. It linked to a family member of Hoyerman. The DNA didn't just appear in one location, it was found on multiple victims. He had left a trace and science caught up. With digital records, phone pings, burner account links, and now DNA evidence, a task force was formed to quietly surveil him. For months, they watched his every move, his commutes, his routine stops at pizza shops, his late-night garbage tosses. That's when they struck gold. A discarded pizza crust retrieved from a Manhattan trash been provided a clean DNA sample, and it matched the hair found at the scene. In July 2023, the hammer dropped. Rex Heuermann was arrested and charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman. Charges for Maureen Brainerd Barnes soon followed. The public was stunned. A man living in plain sight, a father, a successful businessman, accused of being the Gilgo Beach serial killer. But as the case dominated headlines, one question resurfaced with renewed urgency. What about Shannan Gilbert? Suffolk County Police still maintained that Shannan's death was not consistent with homicide. They insisted it was likely accidental, that she ran into the marsh, disoriented, and drowned. But many disagreed. Her family, her lawyer, and now the public. If Heuermann truly was responsible for the Gilgo 4, and his crimes were that methodical, why wasn't Shannan one of his victims? Or was she? The timeline of Shannan's disappearance, May 1st, 2010, predates the discovery of the Gilgo Beach bodies. Her 911 call was frantic, disoriented, and lasted 23 minutes. Could it be that her desperate dash through Oak Beach set off the search that uncovered the others? Was Shannan not a victim of the killer, but the reason his victims were found? In the years since, theories have diverged. Some believe Shannan ran into a neighborhood of secrets and corruption, where multiple men might have harmed her, even if not Heuermann. Others believe she stumbled into the path of a predator long before the world knew his name. And others still hold that her death, while tragic, may not have been murder at all. But one fact remains. Without Shannan, those other women might never have been found. Her death forced a search. Her 911 call cracked open a mystery. And her family's refusal to stay silent lit a fire that burned through over a decade of secrecy. Do you believe Shannan's death was truly unrelated to the Gilgo Beach murders? Or was she the first victim overlooked? In the quiet corners of Long Island, the legacy of Shannan Gilbert continues to echo, not just through the marsh where she was found, but in courtrooms, vigils, and the hearts of those who refused to let her be forgotten. After the arrest of Rex Heuermann in 2023, the media spotlight returned to Oak Beach. Cameras flooded the neighborhood. Reporters rehashed timelines. Documentaries surged in popularity. But for Shannan's mother, Mari Gilbert, justice was still incomplete. Mari had always believed her daughter was murdered. From the beginning, she challenged the police narrative. She fought for an independent autopsy. She stood in front of microphones, in state offices, and across protest lines declaring, "My daughter didn't drown. Someone killed her." That second autopsy, conducted by Dr. Michael Baden, a renowned forensic pathologist, revealed injuries to Shannan's neck consistent with homicidal strangulation. No water in the lungs. No sign of accidental drowning. Yet Suffolk County Police refused to revise their conclusion. They called the findings inconclusive. Mari was undeterred. She sued the police department. She attended every press conference about the Gilgo Beach case. She became a reluctant symbol of a mother's unbreakable will. And then another tragedy. In 2016, Mari Gilbert was murdered, stabbed to death by her other daughter, Sarah, during a mental health crisis. It was a horror layered atop grief. The woman who had fought so tirelessly for Shannan now became a victim herself. The Gilbert family was devastated. But Mari's surviving daughters, especially Cher Gilbert, picked up the torch. Cher continued her mother's mission, demanding full transparency from the police and a formal ruling that Shannan's death was a homicide. By 2024, Rex Heuermann had pleaded not guilty. His trial was pending. Prosecutors were building what they called an airtight case, bolstered by digital evidence, cell tower data, and DNA. But despite mounting public pressure, Shannan's case remained officially classified as undetermined. For many, this unresolved status speaks volumes about how society and law enforcement have historically treated sex workers. If Shannan had been a college student, a wealthy suburban teen, would her case have been dismissed so quickly? Would her death have sparked a manhunt instead of skepticism? Today, on the stretch of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, a simple sign stands as a haunting reminder: justice for the lost girls. Beneath it, crosses and photos are staked in the ground. Among them is Shannan's, the woman whose scream for help may have exposed a killer, but whose own truth is still in limbo. Her story is more than a mystery. It's a symbol of systemic failure, of a broken response, of a voice that still cries out, waiting to be heard. And so we ask, was Shannan Gilbert a tragic accident, or the first fallen domino in a web of darkness that authorities failed to see until it was too late? If you found this story powerful and you want more real cases told with care and depth, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover.